What's that, Dad?
I wonder how many times a child has said that when they're passing the Soham or the Woodbridge Steelyard in a car with their dad. It's unlikely that Father could explain today. A child sitting in the back of the car with his mobile phone, in 30 seconds finds the answer. A Steelyard, Dad. It is unlikely that Dad turned the car to find a person who could explain. This child, born in 1933, had no phone in his house, let alone in his hand. If Dad had a car, he would have stopped. The Woodbridge and Soham Steelyards have pubs and restaurants, and we would have enjoyed conversation with others, a glass of lemonade, a packet of Smith's crisps, and maybe found the answer, a giant weighing machine. The writer has an interest in ancient lifting and weighing gear. He has researched the life and works of Henry Penn, 1685-1729, bell founder of Peterborough and Ecton, then both in Northamptonshire. Penn used weighing machines in different parts of the country for weighing heavy bronze church bells to determine their value. One was at Boston, just above Kings Lynn, another, a portable device, at Yardley Hastings in Northamptonshire. Details of these weighing machines were extracted from the church records. I've hung this from the top of a door frame just to demonstrate the weighing device. Bells were also weighed out in churches, and they were put onto this was put onto the lifting gear that was lifting the bells in and out of the spire. When they finally came down, they were put on the floor. The beam would be attached. At Yardley Hastings in Northamptonshire, they have to send a man to the next village to fetch the beam to weigh the bells. So we're talking about a largish beam. They would have weighed the first bell, and the church wardens would have said, agreed with that price, and the bell founder would have said, I agree with that price, and possibly the congregation would have all cheered, and they may have even sung a hymn. The Hanseatic League was a medieval commercial network of merchant guilds in market towns in Central and Northern Europe, trading from the 13th century. They were also located in London at the Steelyard on the Thames. Boston and Kings Lynn had large Hanseatic warehouses and must have used the Steelyard weighing machines. Here we can see the Kings Lynn buildings from above. The writer owns a complete set of Samuel Pepys diaries, edited by R.C. Latham and W. Matthews, and has read them all, mainly through a long period of illness. Pepys visited the London Steelyards a number of times and met and had conversation with many on all types of subject. Whit Sunday in Volume 2 is a good example, and in a way it explains the simple mass of the Steelyard. Pepys was also a brave man, often travelling by boat to the Steelyard, which in his time belonged to the Navy Board. Whit Sunday, 1661. The barber having done with me, I went to church, and there heard a good sermon of Mr. Mills, fit for the day. Then home to dinner, and then to church again. And going home I find Greytroth, whom I expect today at dinner, come to see me. And so he and I in my chamber, drinking of wine and eating of anchovies, an hour or two, discoursing many things in mathematics. And amongst others he showed me how it comes to pass the strength that levers have. And he showed me that what is got as a matter of strength is lost by them as to a matter of time. There are many different types of Steelyard weighing devices going back to Roman times. Even Santorio sitting in his balance to check his weights. His Steelyard is above his head. 20 years ago we were looking for a machine made for the 17th and 18th centuries, and online we found a member of Kings Lynn forum had found what he thought was a Steelyard in Lynn Fishery Museum passageway, at one time leading to Allen's Yard. We thought this was the time to take our own look, but first we visited Kings Lynn Museum. Asking the curator what he knew about the Steelyard at the Fishery Museum, he was able to show a newspaper cutting and a photograph which gave us enough information to carry the research forward. The Blue Lion, also known as the Hanging Chains, from weighing machine apparatus which included an arm projecting over Norfolk Street. It was dismantled in 1913 and the mechanism was subsequently removed to the Greenland Fishery Museum. The Lynn Advertiser of the 23rd of January 1903 carried an obituary for Andrew Burley, for 30 years the landlord of the Blue Lion. In 1883, an advertisement read, Andrew Burley Carmen, goods carefully removed to any part with the greatest care and dispatch. He died at his residence, 69 Norfolk Street, in 1903, aged 76. The license became extinct in 1913. 10 little souls stand watching a photographer, as if to say, what are you doing here? He is saying, do you want your photo taken? You will have to stand very still and watch the dicky birds. Among the 10 children are 4 boys near to the door, one with a basket and 2 others with handcarts. It is possible that they are part of Andrew Burley's goods care and dispatch team. 5 stood still and they appear quite clear, but the others moved and they look like small out-of-focus ghosts. A lovely little girl stands in the centre of the other group, clutching what looks like a lady's handbag. They all look well dressed with white collars. A man is standing on the nearby cobbled street with a bowler hat, case and coat over his arm. The lady looks at the complete party from her shop door in the distance. It was June 2009 when my wife Anne and I visited Kings Lynn. We had contacted David Higgins of Lynn Preservation Trust, who had kindly agreed to let us into what was once Greenland Fishery Museum. Mr. Higgins was aware we had come to look at the Steelyard in the passageway, but parts were also in the cellar, for which he had the key. We looked at each other in amazement, as we love ancient buildings, and our minds were boggled with the thought of what was down there in the cellar. The beam of the Steelyard was the main attraction. It was 20 foot long, difficult to photograph in one piece. The blacksmith who drew it out of one rod must have been at the top of his profession. The end that once projected into Norfolk Street was decorated with scrollwork, and what looked like a cannonball was fitted to one end. It is likely to have been painted gold. This was all part of the Steelyard. The click of an ancient key in the lock and we were on our way down the stone steps. Our first sighting was a large fireplace and bread oven with a few modern attachments. It was a large room with very thick walls into which areas had been left opened for storage, one of which contained the other parts of the Steelyard lifting gear, and with difficulty we laid them out on the main floor area. The Steelyard was left on display in the passage above our heads, and the other items collected from the Blue Lion were put into the cellar. They include 2 sets of lifting chains and 1 four-wheel pulley, which took both of us to lift. It had 4 wheels which no longer turned because of rust. There should have been another, identical, which must have been left in the Blue Lion. When the Steelyard was removed, it was sold to a scrap merchant, but later retrieved, with many small broken parts. Let us try to bring the long-lost Steelyard from the Blue Lion at Kings Lynn back to life. The item to be weighed, in this case a cart on 4 hanging chains, is lifted just clear of the road. Then what is called the poise is slid along the Steelyard measuring marks until a balance is obtained, when the indicating needle is upright. It is thought that this Steelyard would cope with a weight of 3 tons. This receipt from the Blue Lion account books, the only one found, is for what looks like 3 tons of bark on May the 15th, 1875. Let's go inside where the action takes place. This drawing was made of the Woodbridge Steelyard and shows how the Steelyards are accessed from an upper chamber. The pulleys found in the cellar of the Fishery Museum must be duplicated, shown with the red arrows. They are closed together by a platform winch having 2 handles, creating the power to lift the heavy load. When the load is lifted clear of what would have been the road, one of at least 2 of the engineers would slide the heavy poise along the arm until the true weight is found. As previously explained, when the indicating needle is upright and the Steelyard horizontal, an equilibrium is obtained, as Greatro explains to Samuel Pepys. And amongst others, he showed me how it comes to pass the strength that levers have. And he showed me that what is got as a matter of strength is lost by them as to a matter of time. The winding gear left is turned by 2 men. The red arrows indicate how the 2 pulleys are pulled together, lifting the Steelyard and the cart. Visiting Ipswich Borough Archives, we find that during the late 1930s and 1940s, a group of enthusiasts spent many hours researching 2 of the 5 known Steelyards. Major E.R. Cooper, FSA, Mr. Benton, Senior Archivist at Avery Scales, Birmingham, Mr. D.G. Grant, landlord of the old Bell and Steelyard, and Mr. H.W. Dickinson of the Newcomen Society. Over 100 letters were passed between these men on how it was used and was it in working order. Drawings were made as the model seen in this film. A letter from Major Grant, landlord of the Bell and Steelyard, dated the 10th of July 1935, tells how it was dismantled in 1897 by a Mr. Ward and Mr. Clayton with 2 labourers, and sent to the 1897 Victorian Exhibition. It was transported in an extra long vehicle and taken to a large, unknown house. The catalogue for the exhibition has 160 pages, and there is no mention of a London street or the Steelyards. It is thought that it was damaged in transit and later repaired and returned to Woodbridge. With the debris cleared, one can see the Steelyard balance, weight and the fulcrum. The poise of the Steelyard and the length of the long arm have to match. At Woodbridge, when the writer first visited, the landlord, Mr. Batstone, told us that the poise had been stolen from display in the fireplace, obviously for scrap. We find from this note of the 1940s that it was made of lead, 112 pounds, exactly 100 weight. So 20 times this equals 1 ton, possibly a good size to match the Steelyard markings. The Woodbridge Steelyard pulleys have been changed. One can see that they are now rope. A chain can be seen loop in the same position, so the chains had been removed. It is known when operated they were very noisy. A volume entitled Inns and Taverns on Old Norwich by Walter Wicks, published in 1925. He was obviously a great observer, as he explains the Magpie in this way. Close by the Magpie Road stands the house with the sign of the Magpie, a bird of good omen, therefore a popular sign in many parts of the country. 40 years or so ago, the house was generally referred to as the Way in Chains, and this was thought to be the sign of the house. It was named so because of a somewhat antiquated weighing machine attached to the front of the house, the upper part of which supported 4 massive chains and projected far into the roadway. Many can well remember the cumbrous machine. Wagons taken with produce came to be weighed. The chains were attached to the wagon, and after much wheezing and pulsations from the machinery, worked by unseen hands, the load was gradually lifted from the earth, the weight taken and gradually let down again. The writer asked Derek Williams and Jack Gerlin, could he use part of their YouTube production, Norwich City Walls and Gates, so that he could place the Magpie Inn, as it says on the drawings, between Magdalen and Augustine Gates. This short section is the result. This lovely drawing, dated 1832, had to be tidied up a little, as it was a copy of a copy, giving the impression of antiquity, and one wonders why the setting has not been painted a number of times. Nothing like this house survives on Magpie Road, Norwich today, although it has a pub with the same name. The building is of a bland-looking construction that could never have had 1 stone from the old Magpie Inn. Norwich City Council owned the 19th century building and state that it is of historic interest, as sections of the city's medieval walls appear in its cellars. The writer thinks that is not the city walls, and it's very likely that it sits on the foundation of the older building. Finding this watercolour of the King's Arms at Great Yarmouth must be attributed to A.W. Benton of Avery. He says it was purchased in a sale by Mr. A.R. Robinson, Chief Weights and Measures Inspector in the district. Until this purchase, Robinson had never heard of the existence of the machine. He eventually gave the painting to the Castle Museum at Norwich. Thomas Meadow owned the King's Arms in 1695, but the first known licensees were Thomas and Mary Mayhew, 1819-1830. And Eleanor Palmer could remember the Steelyard in position in front of the inn. Her father taking possession in 1881. She held the license in 1909, so they knew the old and the new building. The demolition of this ancient building must have been for commercial purposes. Here we go again. Looking at the painting, one can understand visitors coming to the pub for a drink. What a shame. Look at the building that replaced it. The research into the life and work of Henry Penn, Peterborough bell founder, started in 1981, but it was 2012 when the Steelyard section began. Penn's bells weighed on average between 1 ton and 500 weight, so a large portable Steelyard like the one at Yardley Hastings must be the answer. This bell was given to the late Marion Lee, fundraising secretary for bells in Peterborough Cathedral in 1984, which needs a little explanation. It's an exact copy of the American Liberty Bell, dated 1752. Both were cast at Whitechapel Foundry in London. I will explain the smaller one here on the table. These are the loops called cannons. They hold the bell onto the wooden headstock, shown in the photograph of the Liberty Bell. The inscription band is round here, like so, where they put all the details of the dedication. And this bottom part is a sound bow. Now the Liberty Bell is cracked, so today it is not heard. But as Whitechapel cast it, they may have tuned the copy accordingly, so I'll give it a ring. It has a fine note which will test your hearing at its way over 30 seconds. It's gone with me. In the most likely place we could find details of the use of the Soham Steelyard was in the church records, but this was left until last. The following is part of the churchwarden's account of the bells. In 1709, some or all of the bells were taken down and repaired for carrying of the bells to Fulbourn and expenses for ourselves, horses and men, being out 2 nights and bringing them back again, £1 15. Paid to Mr. Waylaugh part of your charge of running the bells, £20. The balance, £7, was paid in 1710. Drink to the value of £1 8 was consumed at John Goldenborough's for ye ringers, and with the bell founder, and £1 6 was paid to Edmund Rumbellas for drink and for the use of his Steelyards to weigh the bells by. The journey was not completed without some little difficulty, for Mr. Plummer was allowed £0.50 towards the repair of his waggon shafts, which were broken on the way to Fulbourn. We do not know much about John Waylott, bell founder, but what we do know tell us he was a very busy man. Waylott, an itinerant bell founder at the beginning of the 18th century, his method was to call on the vicar and ask if anything was wanted, and if a bell was cracked or if a new one was desired, he would dig a mould in the neighbouring field, build a fire, collect his metal and perform the task on the spot. We are approaching the end of this short film and must give mention to Mr. W. A. Benton, the first curator of Avery Museum, Birmingham. He had a great interest in all 5 of these ancient Steelyards and was able to find the drawings and paintings of the lost Norwich, Magpie and King's Arms Yarmouth machines. At Soham in 1940, he managed to get access to the internal structure and working parts. He states that the beams were substantial, but debris prevented him from examining the ends. Taking measurements, he makes this drawing. The story about the Soham bells has already been told, so the answer is yes. The Soham church bells were weighed on Mr. Rumbell's Steelyard. The writer's answer is yes, although he only finds the words Mr. Rumbell's Steelyard and the cost of drink supplied. From a Soham marriage licence, 10th of June 1689, Edmund Rumbello married Margaret Nethercote. Edmund died in 1740. What's that, Dad? It was recognised by the early Woodbridge researchers that a drawing by Edwin Edwards, dated 1887, had what looked like J and E on the front balance end of the Steelyard. Were these the initials of Joseph Eyre of St. Neots? The initials do not appear the same today, as the machine was repaired after damage due to transport to the Great Victorian Exhibition of 1897. Joseph Eyre was a high-class engineer who employed skilled workers consisting of bell founders, clockmakers, iron casting, and completed such schemes as water pumping conduits, a scheme he used for St. Neots in 1735. Of course, the Woodbridge Steelyard, like others, was wrought iron, especially Kings Lynn, which has some spectacular wrought iron decoration. Between 1741 and 8, he manufactured platform weighing machine, demonstrated at the Royal Society by Dr. Desaguliers, which was approved for all major turnpikes, improvements of roads. It proved a great success, as carts could drive onto the platform and no chains and lifting were needed, which proved to be at least 5 times faster. This was the beginning of the end of the great Steelyard weighing machine and the start of platform weighing at a time when the 1747-48 Turnpike Act took place. The writer has a copy of the original, the section between Wansford and Stamford, used here. A letter from H. W. Dickinson of the Newcomen Society, dated 1940, mentions the Turnpike Act of 1741. So the 5 Steelyards shown here in the film were possibly installed as working test machines, all attached to public houses. Soham must be the first, as we can date it to the early 1700s, weighing bells. Then came the platform weighing machine, made by J. Eyre of Steelyards. Others followed. Today there are thousands serving many industries. They may have electronic levers, but I wonder what Greatro and Samuel Pepys would think about it. Greatro had the right idea.
What's that, Dad?